Hi there, this is Brittany from By Brittany Goldwyn. I post videos about plants and projects. It is early winter here in Maryland, Zone 7A, and I did a fall garden tour, a late fall garden tour. So I thought I could do a winter garden tour to show you what I'm trying to grow here in late December through January and February before we really get into spring seed starting, and just kind of walk through the general condition of my garden, which is disarray right now, like a lot of gardeners right now. So we'll start with what's here in the greenhouse, and then we will walk around the yard. I have done quite a few videos about the contents of this greenhouse already, but I am trying to grow a lot over the winter here. This is our first winter with the greenhouse. We are heating it, but we are keeping it to a low temperature of like 42 to 44 degrees at night. So generally during the day, it gets warm enough to grow cool weather crops. And then at night, the goal is to just keep it just above freezing. So we're gonna start off with what I have growing in some of these long rectangular containers that I got from Lidl. I got these from Lidl last growing season for flowers and thought they would be perfect in the greenhouse. I have two down here and then one up here on the top shelf. And this direction over here is where the sun sets. So this is the sunnier side of the greenhouse right now in the winter. As you can see, everything is sprouting really well in here. I did Bloomsdale spinach in the front one, some sort of lettuce in the back. I can't remember what it is. And then I know we've got sprouts in the top one as well. This is also another kind of lettuce. So again, all cooler weather stuff. To get these seeds to germinate, I know lettuce will germinate at a lower temperature, but I did pop this seed mat that I got for free through one of my local plant trade groups. Cannot say enough good things about local plant trade groups if you're looking to try out something new and don't want to spend a ton of money. So I am looking forward to hopefully some more good progress on these greens this winter. I also have all of these grow bags, which also got for free through a local plant trade group. They have a monthly plant swap, and last month someone brought a box of these grow bags completely unused. It looked like they opened them up and only used one. So I took home 6 of them. I have 4 filled up here with some of our $1 raised bed soil we got at the end of the season closeout sale. There are no sprouts in this one. This one has a couple of sprouts. Honestly, I'm the worst at labeling things. I cannot remember what I planted in these. This one has some sprouts too. And then over here, this one has a couple sprouts as well. And these are all cold hardy things. I mean, it could be anything from lettuce to spinach to pak choy to kale and other random things I have for the cooler weather. Up here, I have some of my late fall propagations that I am keeping going throughout the winter until the spring. I did plant some of these in the fall, but I'm trying to keep a lot of them going until the spring. Like this is dill here. I've cut off of that a couple times. I have some rosemary, some catmint, a gorgeous ornamental sweet potato vine. I love the color on these. So I just took a little snip of it and rooted it and propagated it, and I'm gonna try and keep it through the winter in here so I can put it in a pot in the spring. I've got some yarrow, some lavender, and then some sage, and these are all cuttings that I am propagating from plants in my own yard. And I do have these sitting on a heat mat. It is plugged in right now, but I don't keep it plugged in all the time, only when it gets like super duper cold, and I think that these could use a little bit of an extra boost. But as you can see, it is very cold and windy outside, and even without the heater on, it is 55 degrees in here, so super comfortable. Then over here, I just have a couple miscellaneous things. A seriously dry and dying eucalyptus plant that I'm trying to overwinter in here. I've never overwintered a eucalyptus plant in temperatures as low as these. So my hope is that even if it looks super ugly when I cut it down to the soil or cut it back, it will regrow in the summer because I love growing eucalyptus as an annual here. This is just a random pot that I threw some lettuce seeds in a couple days ago. This is a prickly pear cactus. We got these pads from a birthday trip we took for my dad. Thought it would be a nice way to remember the trip. And I wanted to bring them in here before they got too nuked by cold and frost. You can see I waited a little bit too long, but these are perennial in my area, and this one will definitely bounce back when it gets warmer in the spring. And then this is just some paper whites that I potted up out here that I'm going to bring inside to try and force some blooms because I love the way paper white blooms smell, and they're a great plant to force indoors. Now, I have never grown in my Greenstalk anytime other than spring or summer. So since I just got this Greenstalk from Greenstalk, they sent this one to me. I asked them, I'm part of their affiliate program, I saw the color, and obviously I thought I have to have that one, I love it. So they very generously sent me a 5-tier original in the color Razzleberry. And then I actually purchased on their Black Friday sale, I purchased the spinner base and wheels so that I could move this one around and maximize its sun exposure. So now that I have all of this up, I've been seeding some seeds into it. And so far I've only seen a couple sprouts. I saw one, there's a teeny tiny one that's probably hard to see on camera. I did lettuce and spinach throughout this one, and they are just now starting to sprout, which is very exciting. I wasn't sure on the back side of this greenhouse if they would be getting enough sun in the winter, but it seems that they definitely are. I don't have to water this a ton, and I really am actually just watering the pockets right now instead of using the water reservoir to try and help germinate these seeds and to try and make sure I don't get too much overflow down here, since as you can see, there's really nowhere for it to go. So I'm really hoping that in a couple months, the greens in this will take off. And then after the winter is over, I will just roll it right out here on the other side of the greenhouse and probably grow some flowers or herbs here. This so far, since we just put this in the summer of this year, we had the pad poured and built the greenhouse ourselves, and we've really just been using the extra part of the pad as a staging area for buckets or plants or, you know, wheelbarrow or whatever. But I would like to add some nice color here, so I think I'm just going to put the Greenstalk right on the other side and maybe grow some flowers or something super easy in the spring. So we have one main in-ground growing area. It's a 15 by 15 area of grass that we converted to an in-ground garden last spring, primarily to grow asparagus, but we've also been growing a couple other things in this area. So right now I'll show you guys what that looks like. We have obviously the asparagus in the ground because that stays in the ground over the winter, and then we just have a bunch of leaves piled on top of them. And I have a couple random fava beans in here. I'm really just trying to see exactly how much cold these fava beans can take. They will look, after like a 20-degree night, they'll look absolutely awful. And then the temperatures will get up into the 30s and they'll rebound pretty quickly. So I'm excited to see if these can make it through the winter without any sort of real protection other than a bit of leaves around the base. So this is a very sad parsley that I'm just kind of letting it ride. And then in this area, this is where we grew sweet potatoes. And we had a lot of success growing sweet potatoes in this area, despite the fact that it was the first time we've ever grown in this area. I was super pleased with it. I did put 2 Brussels sprout plants in here, and I put them in a bit late. I got them for free, so I figured, why the heck not? But honestly, they're pretty pathetic. I put them in probably in October sometime. And at this point, I just decided, you know what, I'm just gonna leave them in the ground and see what they do. Maybe they'll keep growing, maybe they won't. They haven't really done anything, but they haven't died. And this whole area, I did 2 rows of garlic, and you can actually see some areas where it's peeking up here. So you wanna plant garlic in the fall and let it go all winter, and then harvest it in around June-ish time. So that's my plan for this area. Just keep this mulched. The frost will probably nuke off any of that little tender growth at the top, but it should stay safe underneath all of these leaves. And then by the time it's time to harvest, the sweet potatoes I'm planning to plant here next year should be really taking off. So we're trying to maximize this space by planting around the year. So since it is so cold, we did winterize all of our rain barrels and gutters, but there's one area right on the side of the sunroom that we just keep open all winter. So when the water comes down or it melts, it goes down through the gutter, into the rain barrel, and right out the spigot. And what that allows me to do is to keep a rain barrel right underneath the spigot, that when we have even slightly above freezing days, we will get water going into the watering can here. And then when it fills, I'll dump it into this bucket, and then put it right back to gather more water. And that allows me to gather some water during a time when our hoses are winterized, so I don't have any source of water to the greenhouse. I will then carry those buckets into the greenhouse and fill up my watering can with them so that I can water what I'm growing in there. This random mound here is where we put a pond in last year. We had all this extra dirt, so we just piled it over here and decided to just throw some watermelons on it. And it actually did pretty well the first year, but I'd really like to improve the soil. So I've stacked it high with leaves and some compost to hopefully let that degrade over the winter and turn into a healthier growing space for next year to grow some more watermelons on. We have 7 raised beds here in the garden area, and I am growing in all 7 of them either on purpose or accidentally or lazily. So I'll explain what that means through each of the beds. But basically, if I had something in the beds that was still growing when it started to get really cold, I just decided to keep it there because why not? I like to do experiments and see how cold things can actually get while still growing and producing. And so far what I have in these beds isn't really growing super fast, but it hasn't died. So I don't know, we could see what happens in the spring with it. I won't pull it until I am ready to plant my spring crops or my super early cool weather spring stuff in these beds. So the first one up here, I have shredded leaves mulched in it. I have 3 Brussels sprouts plants, and these are from the same batch of Brussels sprouts I put over in the in-ground area. And again, they were late, but these did like so much better. And if you look in this plant, you can actually see the start of some Brussels sprouts growing on this one. So I'm just leaving it. I'm gonna leave it, see what happens. Obviously something's enjoying eating it here in the middle of winter, so have at it. I'm not really too concerned about whether these produce or not. They're more of an experiment. And then I've got some random spinach seeds popped in here that are sprouting and growing slowly. Some other random fava beans that seem to be still hanging in there. And then in this bed, I've got green onions, more fava beans, and some random lettuce that shockingly I have not covered at all. It looked really bad after we got a couple nights in the high teens and low 20s, but it seems to have rebounded to the point of where I'm not going to pull it. I'm going to continue letting it grow and see what it does. And on nights where it gets super cold, if I remember, I'll probably come out here and throw a frost cloth or something over top of it. These 2 areas, I'm trying to do a hoop house experiment, seeing if I can germinate and grow some cooler weather crops in these beds over the winter. Again, it is late December in zone 7A, almost Christmas, so not an ideal time to grow, but I've been really surprised by what temperatures things will germinate and grow in. So underneath of the plastic here, I have a layer of frost cloth and then just various lettuce and spinach and kale and leek and things like that. Things that just generally do well in lower temperatures. I'm not ready to take the top off of these and check them yet, but I do have a video walking through how I set up each of these hoop houses if you're interested in trying that out as well. And then the front 3 beds, 2 of them is pretty much just fava beans and the remnants of the fall snap peas that I've just let stay in there. I'm hoping that they will just become one with the soil. As you can see, these fava beans here look significantly worse than the other ones, which it's very interesting to see how the same plant performs so differently throughout the yard. And this spinach plant is doing really well. I've picked a couple leaves off of this one throughout the winter. And again, this bed is completely uncovered. I've only mulched it with shredded leaves. This bed has fava bean seeds in it as well and is mulched with shredded leaves. And then over here we have a bed that I have not covered at all. I am planning to do some sort of hoop house structure over this to hopefully help the spinach along. But as you can see, these spinach seeds have germinated really, really well. They look awesome. They are actually growing at a surprising rate, to me at least, given how cold it's been here. And I think I could really help them along if I give them some sort of little hoop house, greenhouse effect to help them along. I just haven't really gotten around to it. Now, one thing you probably noticed throughout my yard is that I have a lot of dead plants that I leave in place. I'm a big fan of leaving my perennials and even some of my annuals in place over through the fall and winter so that, you know, bugs can use them as shelter. And if I'm doing some sort of new bed in the spring, I can use them as organic matter to fill the bottom of the bed or to mix under the soil. All of my raised garden beds, the bottom like foot of each of them, if they're the deep ones, are filled with random yard waste and stuff like that that I just topped off with compost. So I do like to let them just do their thing throughout the winter, and I won't cut them back until the spring. Generally, a good sign for me is when I see like the first ladybug bugging around. That tells me that it's okay for me to start cutting these back, and that anything that may be using them as overwintering shelter has probably emerged already. But you can see some of these plants actually look pretty well. This is, oh gosh, I can't remember what it's called. Dianthus, I think, yeah. And then I have tons of creeping phlox, also called moss phlox. This one is a super early bloomer in the spring, and as you can see, even has some flowers out right now, which is pretty cool. These I just put in last year, so they haven't spread a ton, but they generally spread and provide a really, really good ground cover. And then I have a ton of catmint all around too, because it just looks so lovely around the beds and does such a great job of attracting pollinators. I also just like the visual interest that the dying plants provide during the winter. Like, I look out and don't just see bare ground. This one actually has a significant amount of green foliage on it still. So I figure, why not just let it ride all winter and then cut it down in the spring when, you know, it's not the end of the summer and you're dying from gardening in the heat. In the spring, you're ready to get out there and like just get to work. So I'd rather save that kind of cutting down work for the spring than do it in the fall when I'm super exhausted. Now, these are grasses that honestly we probably should have cut down by now, but I just really like the visual interest they add in the garden in the winter, and I love cutting the plumes for winter arrangements with just some evergreen and some rosemary and some other random things. They look really, really nice in arrangements. But if we are expecting a decent amount of snow, it's only snowed about an inch here so far, we will cut them down beforehand because they get really heavy when they get wet and weighed down with snow. Over here we have our pond. This is our first winter with the pond, and we haven't really done much to it other than, you know, monitor when it drops down really cold, but it has not frozen at all. The fishies are fine in there, and the plants around it are varying levels of green. It just kind of depends what it is. You can see this is a coneflower plant that I've left here standing for the winter, and then another catmint. The lavender still looks really lovely in the middle of winter, which is another reason why I want to plant more of the lavender. The lavender and the rosemary, not only are they perennial, and I love them in the spring and summer, but they make awesome plants for arrangements in the fall and winter because they just look so good even when it's really, really cold. My aster looks just so bad. I have 2 asters here, and I neglected to cut them back mid-season this year, so you can see they got super droopy and floopy. Next year, I will not make that mistake. I'll cut these back in the spring as soon as I see something starting to sprout. And then back here, we just have other random perennials that I've let just die off and do their thing for the winter. This is the berry patch that I started putting in the fall. We did plant, oh gosh, I can't even remember now. I think 3 or 4 blueberry bushes and then a couple raspberry and blackberry bushes. So I planted these and then insulated all of them with leaves. And then I started sheet mulching to kill off the grass in areas, but then it got really cold, so I needed to take a break from sheet mulching for a couple weeks, and I will probably pick that back up soon here if we have a warm couple of days where we can get to the dump and pick up some cheap compost to use for the sheet mulching here. All of my fruit trees that we planted here, I have a video on planting our fruit trees, how we planted them, what we planted, why we chose it. This whole area back here is going to be our fruit tree mini orchard. I have all of these wrapped with their little bandages for the winter. This is the first winter with all of these. We planted them in the fall, so I'm desperately hoping that they all make it through their first winter. And then in the spring, we get to learn about pruning fruit trees because we have no idea what we're doing pruning fruit trees. In the back here, I also have a strawberry patch that I really neglected this year that I'm going to be digging up and maybe trying to grow some in one of my green stalks. And then I also have our clearance perennial area back here where my area for where I put plants when I split them or when I don't know where to put them or when I get a cheap plant and I want to keep it, but I don't know where to put it in my yard. I put it here in my perennial bed. So this has lavender, it has rosemary, it has lots of sage. You can see the sage is still looking really nice back here. I'm still clipping the sage for things like cooking and arrangements. And then I'm clipping a lot of the rosemary back here as well. I planted a bunch of milkweed plants back here that I'm really excited to kind of fill this area with milkweed in the spring. Not common milkweed, I'm doing swamp milkweed, which I think is a little bit less weedy looking, a little bit more like shrub ornamental looking. So I think it's gonna look really pretty back here in the spring. And then the last area are our 3 yard waste bins. This is one of the main ways that we compost. We compost yard waste here. We collect leaves and put them in. I have a whole video about making leaf compost too that features these bins. The one here right behind me is all leaves. So as it rains and as those decompose, we turn them a little bit and add another bag of leaves from the stockpile we have, which is like 10 bags left from going around the neighborhoods near us and taking leaves on yard waste day. The one in the middle has about half leaves, half yard waste from throughout the season. And then the one up here is mostly yard waste with just a top off of leaves. And we do have a Vago countertop kitchen composter that I like using in the winter when our compost tumblers are otherwise like completely frozen through and not really doing anything. So what that creates is like a pre-compost meal that's still really rich in nutrients. So I will make that indoors and then take it out here and sprinkle it on top of our yard waste bins to help add some organic matter to it. And then I just kind of let Mother Nature do her thing with rain and snow and whatever. So that's about what we're dealing with here in December in Maryland Zone 7A. It's looking okay, right? Like I love coming out here and dreaming about what I'm going to do in the spring and the summer and looking forward to tomatoes. But I also love coming out here and just kind of enjoying the yard for what it is in the winter and seeing what I can do with it in the winter. So growing spinach, growing things in my greenhouse, growing things in hoop houses. For me, it's all about experimenting and figuring out what I can do with my garden, maximizing my time and my space and not just sticking to spring and summer growing. So I hope you guys found that interesting. This concludes my winter garden tour. I will probably do a late winter garden tour as well once I'm gearing up to start doing some more stuff for spring. Until then, happy planting.